What happens when one of Hollywood's most beloved actresses faces off against a talk show host who thinks he can ambush her with personal attacks on live television? Tonight we dive into an explosive verbal battle that captivated audiences. The moment Jennifer Lawrence confronted Stephen Colbert's relentless questioning, ultimately reaching her breaking point. Before we dissect this incredible confrontation, make sure to hit that subscribe button and share your thoughts in the comments below. The Late Show studio buzzed with anticipation as Stephen Colbert concluded his opening monologue to thunderous applause. The audience was in high spirits, expecting a typical enjoyable interview with Jennifer Lawrence. As the applause subsided, Stephen's demeanor subtly shifted, his smile adopting a more calculated edge. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Academy Award-winning actress, Jennifer Lawrence," Stephen announced with his characteristic enthusiasm. Jennifer emerged, radiant in a sleek black dress, waving to the standing ovation crowd, completely at ease as she settled into the guest chair. "Jennifer, welcome back to the show," Stephen said, his tone warm but with an undercurrent Jennifer didn't immediately perceive. "Thanks for having me, Stephen. It's always great to be here," Jennifer replied, her genuine smile illuminating the studio. "So, let's talk about your new film. You play a woman dealing with some pretty dark psychological territory. Tell us about that experience," Stephen began, seemingly adhering to the expected script. Jennifer launched into her prepared talking points about the challenging role, discussing her preparation process and the emotional toll of the character. She spoke passionately about working with the director and her fellow cast members, clearly excited to share her creative process with the audience. "That sounds incredibly demanding," Stephen nodded. But then his expression hardened slightly. "Speaking of demanding situations, I have to ask you about something that's been circulating online. There are some reports about your behavior on set, some pretty serious allegations about how you treat crew members." Jennifer's smile faltered for a moment, confusion flickering across her face. "I'm sorry, what reports? I'm not sure what you're referring to." "Well, there are several anonymous sources claiming that you have a pattern of being difficult to work with, that you've made unreasonable demands, and created hostile working environments," Stephen pressed, leaning forward with the demeanor of an investigative journalist rather than a late-night host. "Stephen, I have no idea what you're talking about," Jennifer said, her tone becoming more serious. "I pride myself on being professional and respectful to everyone I work with. I think if you check with any director or producer I've worked with, they would tell you the complete opposite." "But these sources seem pretty credible," Stephen continued, ignoring her defense. "They describe specific incidents where you allegedly threw tantrums and demanded special treatment that went far beyond normal star accommodations." Jennifer shifted in her chair, clearly uncomfortable with the conversation's direction. "I'm not sure why you're bringing up anonymous gossip instead of talking about my actual work. These sound like tabloid rumors, not legitimate journalism." "I'm just trying to get to the truth," Stephen replied with mock sincerity. "The public deserves to know who they're really supporting when they buy movie tickets." "The truth?" Jennifer's voice began to rise slightly. "The truth is that I've been working in this industry for over a decade, and I've built my reputation on being professional and collaborative. I'm not sure why you're choosing to ambush me with unsubstantiated claims instead of having a real conversation." Stephen sensed he was getting under her skin and decided to push harder. "Well, since we're talking about truth, let's discuss your recent comments about pay equality in Hollywood. Some people are saying that your activism is just a publicity stunt, that you're being hypocritical given your own privileged position." Jennifer's jaw tightened visibly. "My advocacy for equal pay isn't a publicity stunt, Stephen. It's about fairness and justice for all women in this industry, not just myself. I've put my money where my mouth is by taking pay cuts and supporting legislation. But critics argue that it's easy for someone who's already made tens of millions of dollars to lecture others about fairness. Don't you think that's a bit rich coming from someone in your position?" Stephen's tone was becoming increasingly confrontational. "I think it's rich that you're sitting here attacking me for trying to make things better for other people." Jennifer shot back, her famous composure beginning to crack. "I could easily just take my money and stay quiet, but I choose to speak up because it's the right thing to do." "Some would say you speak up because it keeps you in the headlines," Steve countered with a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. The audience began to sense the tension in the room. What had started as typical celebrity banter was clearly becoming something much more uncomfortable. Jennifer looked around at the crowd, then back at Stephen, her expression a mixture of disbelief and growing anger. "Are you seriously questioning my motives for advocating for equality?" she asked, her voice carrying a warning tone that Stephen chose to ignore. "I'm just asking the questions that people are thinking," he replied with false innocence. "Isn't that what good journalism is about? Good journalism." Jennifer's voice cut through the studio air like a blade. "Stephen, this isn't journalism at all. This is tabloid gossip masquerading as legitimate questioning. And frankly, I'm disappointed that you would stoop to this level." Stephen leaned back in his chair, clearly enjoying the reaction he was getting. "I think the audience deserves to hear all sides of the story, don't you? We can't just ignore the elephant in the room." "What elephant?" Jennifer demanded, her patience wearing dangerously thin. "You're talking about anonymous sources and unspecified allegations. Where's your evidence? Where are your facts?" "The fact is that multiple sources have come forward," Stephen replied smugly. "Are you saying they're all lying?" "I'm saying that without names, without verification, without any actual proof, what you're doing is character assassination," Jennifer fired back, her voice rising. "This is exactly the kind of irresponsible media behavior that destroys careers and reputations based on nothing but rumors." The audience was completely silent now, the tension in the room palpable. Too many were shifting uncomfortably in their seats, clearly not enjoying what they were witnessing. Stephen sensed the mood but doubled down anyway. "Let's talk about something more concrete then. Your relationship with director David Russell. There were reports of heated arguments on multiple film sets. Care to comment on that?" Jennifer's eyes flashed dangerous. "My working relationships with directors are exactly that. Working relationships. Creative differences happen in every artistic collaboration. The fact that you're trying to turn normal professional discussions into some kind of scandal shows exactly what kind of interviewer you really are." But witnesses described these as more than creative differences. They described shouting matches, walkouts, threats to quit productions, Stephen pressed, consulting his note cards with theatrical precision. "Witnesses?" Jennifer laughed bitterly. "More anonymous sources, Stephen. Do you realize how cowardly this is? You're hiding behind unnamed gossips to attack someone sitting right in front of you." "I'm just doing my job," Stephen replied with mock defensiveness. "Your job is supposed to be entertaining people and having interesting conversations with your guests." Jennifer shot back, not ambushing them with hit pieces disguised as interviews. Stephen's mask was starting to slip, his frustration with her resistance becoming more apparent. "Maybe if you were more honest about who you really are, we wouldn't need to have this conversation." "Who I really am?" Jennifer's voice was incredulous. "Stephen, you don't know who I really am. You've spent your time reading gossip blogs instead of actually researching my work, my charitable contributions, the positive relationships I've built throughout this industry. I've done my research," Stevens insisted, "and what I've found is someone who presents one face to the public while behaving very differently behind closed doors." Jennifer stood up abruptly, startling both Stephen and the audience. "3. That's enough. I came here to talk about my film, to have a professional conversation, and instead, you've turned this into some kind of character assassination attempt." "Sit down, Jennifer. We're not finished here," Stephen said, his tone becoming more authoritative. "Oh, we're absolutely finished," Jennifer replied, her voice deadly calm now. "I'm not going to sit here and let you destroy my reputation based on anonymous gossip and your desperate attempt to create controversy for ratings." Stephen realized he was losing control of the situation and tried to regain the upper hand. "This is live television, Jennifer. You can't just walk away when the questions get tough." "Watch me," she replied simply, but she remained standing, glaring at him. Stephen turned to the audience with a theatrical shrug. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is what happens when you ask celebrities the hard questions. They can't handle the truth." That was the final straw. Jennifer's composure completely shattered. "The truth? You want to talk about truth? The truth is that I've spent my entire career treating people with respect and professionalism. The truth is that I've used my platform to advocate for important causes and help other people. The truth is that you've ambushed me with lies and rumors because you're desperate for attention. Those aren't lies, Stephen protested weakly. Prove it. Jennifer challenged, her voice echoing through the silent studio. Name your sources. Show your evidence. If you're so committed to journalism and truth, then practice actual journalism instead of this tabloid garbage. Stephen fumbled with his note cards, clearly unprepared for this level of pushback. I don't have to reveal my sources to protect them. Convenient, Jennifer said sarcastically. Very convenient that your sources need protection when they're spreading lies about me. The studio audience was completely transfixed, watching this verbal battle unfold in real time. Many looked uncomfortable, as if they were witnessing something they shouldn't see. Stephen made one last desperate attempt to regain control. Jennifer, I think you're overreacting. This is just normal interview questioning. Normal? Jennifer's laugh was sharp and humorless. Stephen, there's nothing normal about what you've done here tonight. You violated every principle of responsible journalism and basic human decency. I'm just holding you accountable, Stephen replied, but his voice lacked conviction now. Accountable for what, exactly? For anonymous rumors? For being successful? For speaking up about important issues? Jennifer's voice was building to a crescendo. You want to hold someone accountable? Look in the mirror. Stephen tried to interrupt, but Jennifer wasn't finished. You've used your platform tonight to spread unverified gossip, to attack someone's character without evidence, and to turn what should have been a professional interview into a personal vendetta. If anyone should be held accountable here, it's you. The silence in the studio was deafening. Stephen looked around desperately, seeking support from his audience, but found only uncomfortable stares and disapproving expressions. You know what, Stephen? Jennifer said, her voice cutting through the uncomfortable silence like a knife. I've been in this business long enough to recognize a setup when I see one. This whole thing was planned, wasn't it? You never intended to have a real interview. Stephen shifted nervously in his chair, his carefully constructed persona beginning to crumble under the weight of her accusation. I don't know what you're talking about. This is just how interviews work. No, this is how ambushes work, Jennifer corrected him sharply. Real interviews involve preparation, research about actual projects and achievements, questions that serve the audience rather than your ego. The audience members were looking at each other now, many nodding in agreement with Jennifer's assessment. The energy in the room had completely shifted, and Stephen could feel it slipping away from him. Jennifer, please sit down so we can finish this professionally. Stephen tried again, but his voice lacked any real authority now. Professionally? Jennifer's eyebrows shot up in disbelief. You forfeited any claim to professionalism the moment you decided to attack me with anonymous gossip instead of discussing my actual work. Stephen glanced desperately at his producers in the wings, hoping for some kind of signal about how to handle this unprecedented situation. But they looked just as stunned as everyone else in the studio. Look, maybe we got off on the wrong foot, Stephen attempted, trying to salvage what was left of the interview. Why don't we start over and talk about your new film? Jennifer let out a bitter laugh that echoed through the studio. Start over, Stephen. You can't unring this bell. You can't spend 20 minutes attacking someone's character and then pretend it never happened. I wasn't attacking your character, Stephen protested weakly. I was asking legitimate questions. Legitimate questions? Jennifer's voice rose again. Based on what legitimate sources? You keep hiding behind this anonymous gossip like it's some kind of journalistic shield, but real journalists don't work this way. Stephen fumbled with his note cards again, clearly struggling to find a way back to safer ground. The public has a right to know about the people they admire. The public has a right to accurate information, not tabloid speculation presented as fact. Jennifer shot back immediately. What you've done tonight isn't journalism, it's character assassination. And frankly, it's beneath the platform you've been given. The studio audience was completely captivated now, watching this real-time dismantling of a talk show host by his own guest. Many were openly supportive of Jennifer, some even applauding her responses. Stephen noticed the audience's reaction and made one final desperate play. I think you're being overly sensitive about some pretty standard interview question. That was the moment Jennifer Lawrence truly lost her composure. Her eyes blazed with fury, as she took a step closer to his desk. Overly sensitive, she repeated, her voice dangerously quiet. Stephen, you just spent the better part of half an hour trying to destroy my reputation on national television. And you think I'm being overly sensitive? I was just doing my job, Stephen repeated lamely. Your job is to entertain people and have meaningful conversations with interesting guests, Jennifer exploded. Your job is not to spread unverified rumors, attack people's characters, or turn your show into some kind of gossip rag masquerading as legitimate television. Stephen looked around frantically, realizing that he had completely lost control of not just the interview, but the entire room. The audience was clearly on Jennifer's side, his crew looked uncomfortable, and his guest was systematically destroying his credibility in real time. Jennifer, I think you need to calm down, he said, which turned out to be possibly the worst thing he could have said. Calm down? Jennifer's voice could have shattered glass. You spend 30 minutes ambushing me with lies and rumors, questioning my integrity, my professionalism, and my motives, and then you tell me to calm down. She turned to address the audience directly, something that clearly made Stephen even more uncomfortable. Ladies and gentlemen, this is exactly the kind of behavior that makes people distrust media. This is what happens when entertainment shows pretend to be journalism, but abandon every ethical standard that real journalists follow. The audience erupted in applause, clearly supporting her statement. Stephen looked mortified as his own audience applauded his guest's criticism of him. Jennifer, please. Stephen tried one more time, but she cut him off immediately. Please what? Please sit here and let you continue this character assassination. Please pretend that what you've done tonight is acceptable behavior. Please enable your desperate attempt to create controversy at my expense. Stephen's face was turning red now, whether from embarrassment or anger it was impossible to tell. I think you're completely overreacting to some simple questions. Simple questions? Jennifer laughed harshly. Stephen, you accused me of being difficult to work with based on anonymous sources. You questioned my advocacy work and called it a publicity stunt. You suggested I'm hypocritical and dishonest. None of that was simple, and none of it was based on facts. She paused, looking directly into the camera. And you know what the really sad part is? I came here excited to talk about a project I'm passionate about, to discuss the craft of acting, to have a real conversation about meaningful topics. Instead, I got ambushed by someone who thinks tabloid journalism is acceptable behavior. Stephen made one last desperate attempt to regain some semblance of control. Well, this has certainly been an interesting conversation. Interesting? Jennifer's voice was incredulous. Stephen, this wasn't a conversation. This was an attack disguised as an interview. There's a huge difference. She began walking toward the edge of the stage, clearly preparing to leave. 6. Stephen panicked, realizing that his guest was actually going to walk out on live television. 7. Jennifer, you can't leave. We're in the middle of a show, he called after her. She turned back to face him one final time, her expression a mixture of disappointment and disgust. Stephen, you ended this show the moment you decided to abandon basic journalistic ethics and human decency. I'm just making it official. This is completely unprofessional, Stephen said, his voice cracking slightly. Jennifer stopped dead in her tracks and slowly turned around. The look on her face was absolutely devastating. Unprofessional? You want to talk about unprofessional behavior? She walked back toward his desk, her presence commanding the entire studio. Unprofessional is ambushing a guest with anonymous gossip. Unprofessional is using your platform to spread unverified rumors. Unprofessional is attacking someone's character without evidence or accountability. Stephen opened his mouth to respond, but Jennifer wasn't finished. Unprofessional is violating the basic trust that exists between a host and a guest. Unprofessional is turning what should be an entertaining conversation into a personal vendetta. And unprofessional is then having the audacity to call your guest unprofessional when they refuse to participate in your character assassination. The studio was completely silent except for Jennifer's voice, which carried clearly to every corner of the room. So yes, Stephen, someone here has been unprofessional tonight. But it wasn't me. With that, Jennifer Lawrence turned and walked off the stage, leaving Stephen Colbert sitting alone at his desk, facing an audience that was now openly applauding her exit. The sound of their applause filled the studio as Stephen sat there, clearly unsure of how to proceed with the rest of his show. As Jennifer disappeared into the wings, Stephen looked directly into the camera, his usual confidence completely shattered. The charm and wit that had made him a beloved late-night host were nowhere to be found, replaced by the uncomfortable realization that he had just been completely dismantled by his own guest on live television. The audience continued applauding as the camera held on Stephen's stunned face, capturing the exact moment when a talk show host's ambush backfired spectacularly, creating one of the most uncomfortable and revealing moments in late-night television history. What do you think about Jennifer Lawrence's response to Stephen Colbert's ambush tactics? Was she right to call him out so directly, or should she have handled it differently? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories about the moments when Hollywood interviews go completely off the rails.